Hello and welcome to Grammar Skills module number 10 on dangling modifiers. So let's talk first about what a dangling modifier is. So let's begin with the definition of a modifier to start with. So a modifier, as the name suggests, changes, limits, or adds information to a sentence. Now, a sentence has become more complex. Introductory clauses that we use to introduce additional information to modify the main idea in the sentence often provide this additional information. And in these introductory clauses, we often omit the subject because we can just imply it rather than explicitly state it. But the important thing is that this implied subject in that introductory clause has to match the explicitly stated subject in the main clause. And when that is not the case, then we end up with a dangling modifier. So it's probably best to look at an example. So here is this sentence. Having eaten our sandwiches, the steamboat departed. So the main clause, again, the independent clause that could stand alone as a sentence is the steamboat departed. So it's independent because it's the subject and the verb. So the steamboat is the explicitly stated subject in that sentence. Now, in the introductory clause, having eaten our sandwiches, the assumption is, the implication that the subject is we. We ate our sandwiches. So we have the implied subject we in the introductory clause, but the explicitly stated subject the steamboat in the main clause. So those two do not match. So the way the sentence is written right now implies that the steamboat ate our sandwiches and then departed. And we know that's not the case. All right, so how can we revise this? So we can do this in a couple of different ways. We can, first of all, either clarify who ate the sandwiches, or we can change the subject in the main clause to adjust to the introductory clause that implies the subject. So the first possibility here would be after we had eaten our sandwiches, the steamboat departed. So here it's perfectly clear who ate the sandwiches and then subsequently the steamboat departed. If we want to keep the introductory clause, having eaten our sandwiches, we can change the main clause to we departed on the steamboat. So now the subject in the main clause matches the implied subject in the introductory clause. Now, the other thing I would like to draw your attention to in number 1 is the use of the past perfect tense after we had eaten our sandwiches. Okay, so what's happening here is we have two events in the past that took place at different times chronologically. So first, we ate our sandwiches, then the steamboat departed, or we departed on the steamboat. So if we break this up into two separate sentences, each of the sentences can be in the simple past tense. First, we did this, and then we did that. However, by using the construction with after and combining those two ideas that occurred at different times in the past into one sentence, we are expressing the more recent one, the departure of or on the steamboat, in the simple past tense, but the event that took place in the further distant past, the eating of the sandwiches, in the past perfect tense. Okay, so again, that would be after we had eaten our sandwiches, past perfect tense, the steamboat departed, simple past tense. All right, so on the following slides, you will see sentences containing a dangling modifier. So what I would like you to do is, again, if you're watching it as a video, pause the video, take your time to revise each sentence to clarify the information that it means to convey, and then following each exercise slide will be an answer slide where you will see the correct answer with an explanation. Let's begin with exercise 1. After eating a whole pizza, my stomach hurt. Let's look what the problem with this sentence is. So, the explicitly stated subject in the main clause is my stomach. The implied subject in the introductory clause, however, is I. I ate the whole pizza, which is why my stomach hurts. The way the sentence is written right now is my stomach ate the whole pizza and then it hurt. Okay, again, not the case. So, possibilities for revision here are, first of all, after I had eaten a whole pizza, my stomach hurt. Okay? So we are adjusting the introductory clause by actually explicitly stating the subject who ate the whole pizza. The other thing, again, we have to do because we're using the construction with the subordinating conjunction after. We are combining those two ideas that happened at different times in the past. First, the eating of the entire pizza, and then the subsequent stomach ache. So we have to make it after I had eaten a whole pizza. Again, if I want to keep that introductory clause after eating a whole pizza, I can change the main clause to I had a stomach ache. So now we're switching the subject to the subject that now matches the implied one here. At the age of 5, my father took me on a trip to London. In this sentence, the explicitly stated subject in the main clause is my father, because the main clause is my father took me on a trip to London. The implied subject in the introductory clause is I. Okay? So when I was 5 years old, this is what happened. The way the sentence is written right now implies that when my father was 5 years old, he took me on a trip to London. When our dads were 5 years old, we were not going to be around for quite some time, so that's not possible. So, possibilities for revision here are, again, clarifying the subject in the introductory clause. When I was 5, my father took me on a trip to London. If I want to keep the introductory clause as it is written, at the age of 5, then I can make the main clause, I accompanied my father on a trip to London, because then again, the implied subject I here matches the explicitly stated subject I in the main clause. Moving on to exercise 3. My face was cold after skiing all day. Now, another way to express this would be after skiing all day, comma, my face was cold. So the way the original sentence here is written is we're beginning with the main clause, the main idea, my face was cold, and then continue with the subordinate clause after skiing all day, because again, it begins with the subordinating conjunction after. Also, again, please remember when we're beginning with the main clause and continue with the subordinating clause, there is no comma here. When we switch it around and we begin with the subordinating clause after skiing all day, then we need a comma before the main clause, which is my face was cold. So, the subject that is explicitly stated in the main clause is my face. The implied subject in the introductory clause is I. I was skiing all day. So hopefully this is not a question of my face skiing all day. That would not be good. Okay, so we have to clarify that. So we could say my face was cold after I had been skiing all day, or if we switch it around, after I had been skiing all day, my face was cold. So again, because we are combining those two events in the past into one sentence, the skiing all day, the subsequent phase being cold, we have to express this skiing all day, which was in the further past, in past perfect. Exercise 4. Stuck in the hot classroom, my afternoon was awful. The subject in the main clause, which is explicitly stated, is my afternoon. Now, the implied subject in the introductory clause is I. I was the one who was stuck in the hot classroom all afternoon, presumably. Okay. So right now, the way the sentence is written implies that my afternoon was awful because it was stuck in the hot classroom. It was not, I was. So, possibilities to revise this incorrect sentence include, because I was stuck in the hot classroom, my afternoon was awful. Now, note here, the subordinating conjunction I use here is because, I could also say since. We can still continue to use the simple past tense. Was stuck. It's passive voice, but it's simple past tense. This is not a question of first this happened and then that happened. Those two things can happen simultaneously. While I'm stuck in the hot classroom, my afternoon was awful. Or because I was stuck in the hot classroom, my afternoon was awful. So this is not first this happened and then that happened. Again, when we use the subordinating conjunction after, then we have to convert that part to the past perfect tense. If I want to keep the introductory clause stuck in the hot classroom, I can change the main clause to I had an awful afternoon.